Welcome and good to see you again. It's been a long time, a very long time.
It's great to be with you again. Yeah.
Um, so I just took a little blurb off your website as a short introduction. Um, and you can correct any of this if need be. Bill Epperly is an earthy mystic and teacher of embodied spirituality. He helps others cultivate a mindful, practical approach to awakened life and service. So is that all accurate still in this present moment?
That's what I'm shooting for. Yeah. Yeah.
I really like that. An earthy mystic. I really like that a lot.
Well, it seemed to me that one of the needs today is to make mysticism and spirituality intensely personal, but also practical. And we might be tempted to get up and out of here, but we really need to be down and in here,
Yeah.
right in the midst of it all. And I think that's the original intention of all the traditions, is to help people awaken into awakened living and service. But sometimes, or you could say, the ego co-opts the spiritual path and makes it about self-glorification or comfort or well, there's just so many reasons so many reasons why we might want to get out of here. So having said that, maybe we might begin our time together by just dropping into this moment.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, definitely.
So I would suggest just to begin by taking a look at the space you're in, reminding yourself it's a known, safe space, and then letting the eyes close. Dropping into the space within. Noticing sensations in the body. Noticing the breath as it comes in, goes out. And just allowing the self to relax. To relax and settle in that greater being, that greater sense of holding. That is our interconnection with all beings, with all life. I'm attempting to stay here for a long time, but I know we have things to talk about, so come on back.
It is tempting to stay there, isn't it?
It is.
Well, I jotted down just a couple of things that I'm curious about and would like to learn more about, but I'm absolutely willing to kind of go with your lead in what you'd like to share. So, the couple things that I jotted down is your new blog. I am a monk in the world. Is
A
that
monk in the world?
a monk in the world? And then I want to talk about that if you would like, and also non-dual awareness and energy healing, specifically vortex healing.
Mm.
And maybe to get us going, I just jotted down. I think this might have been in a story you were sharing in your blog, but I'm not sure. But I got this from something I was looking at of yours. Um, I am a monk. I live for God alone.
Mm. Mm.
No, I will let you take the lead here, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Irma.
You're welcome.
I am a monk. I live for God alone. So this was a realization I had at one time, many years ago now, maybe 25 years ago. I had this beautiful dream, which I wrote about in my Substack. My Substack post, which is titled Monk in the World, after a beautiful book by that name by Brother Wayne Teasdale. And I had this beautiful dream in which I was ordained, initiated into the community of monks, and realized my identity as a monk. And it's really, I have to say though, it's one of many identities I hold, but had been perhaps one that had moved to the background. And that dream and that realization brought it back to the foreground to be integrated with all the other ways I identify as a husband, as a teacher, as a a cook, a nature lover, so many identities. But this idea of God, living for God alone. See, I think God is that essence, that essential life, that aliveness deep down amidst things that's in every moment, every person, every object, every thought. And so I think it's just an honest statement that for me, the joy, the juice, the pleasure in life is in touching into that little seeing, feeling, experiencing that essence that's in all things. Everything else is, it might be a great entertainment or diversion, but it's not ultimately satisfying. And so in that way, it's just a confession of my reality, that that's what I live for. I live for those special moments. And, getting a big check in the mail or something like that would be exhilarating, but it's not necessarily going to be a God moment. They're often, simple moments, unexpected moment, the moment with the butterfly in the garden, the moment with a friend that we reconnect with, a moment scrubbing the floor of the Zen Buddhist temple was such a simple moment, and yet I had one of my most profound peak experiences while scrubbing the temple floor with an old rag, and so that's what I live for. Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, I know for me, the word God has so many attachments to it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for me, because having a very young, what I would call a spiritual awakening, my introduction with God did not have to do with religion.
Yeah. Right.
Of any kind. So it was very natural. But then, moving forward in life and learning about different religions and how people define God and talk about God, there's so many different attachments to it. So I'm wondering, as you were just sharing what you were sharing, I live for God alone, and defining those experiences. could the word God be replaced for life?
Yeah, I think it could. Brother, this week I'm writing about an experience I had with Brother David Steindl-Rast, amazing Benedictine monk, in whose presence I had an initial awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And Brother David, I've heard him say a few times that perhaps the word God, has said, perhaps we should put a moratorium on using the word God because it's simply not used correctly. He said the same thing about the word sin, too. Mm-hmm. It's simply not used correctly by most people. It's not a guy in the sky. It's not an object out there that's manipulating us. And what it is so hard to articulate that that's the work of all the great theologians and thinkers and writers of metaphysics. So I do think that life with a capital L is a great word for God.
Yeah.
Or aliveness. What makes you truly alive, not in a Disney-like way, but truly resonant with life in a way that makes your bones vibrate, mm-hmm. makes you feel the earth beneath you and the sky above, and your connection with all that. Mm-hmm. So I do think, I didn't use the G word for at least a decade. Mm-hmm. First of all, I had such an aversion to it, and I knew that other people did too. But that's a second thing, and I think that it's really incredibly helpful to explore that aversion to the word God or to these words.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
And if we can explore what that is and find a way to reconnect with our childhood faith tradition in some way, at least to say, oh, that's it. That's what that was all about. Mm-hmm. I think that's tremendously healing. Yeah. And that was another gift that Brother David brought to me and to so many people. And he shared with me, that so often people become Buddhist for a period of time in reaction to the lack of true spirituality in Christianity as they experience it. Yeah. They become Buddhist for a time, and then they have this illumination. Oh, that's it. That's what that was talking about. Mm-hmm. And that's such a healing moment that I'm willing to use a word that might irritate or provoke, because it can be a provocation that's worth exploring.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, it's the question: can we use the word life in connection to God? And then it also came to my mind: can we use the word love? But love is another word that has all these attachments to it.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
It sure does.
And life seems not to have as many attachments, and it seems kind of neutral in a way. But I totally agree that exploring both the word God and the word love, going deeper into that. And I know for me, and how I experience what people call God and what people call love, it's almost like talking about it and even trying to point to it lessens the experience of it. Because it creates a sense of there's me and there's that.
Yeah.
And I don't really experience life in that way on a daily basis. I'm kind of in that oneness, not that there's even something to point to. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense, but I know that's authentic for me and my life experience.
Yeah, that where initially the object of our seeking seems to be outside, And from what I understand of your story, you grew up in a state of union. So there wasn't the seeking phase that so many of us experience, where we believe that the object, the fulfillment, is external to us, and seeking, dear God, come and live within me. Buddha nature, may I be one with you, may I awaken to my Buddha nature. Well, we're already always awake to that nature, and it's almost a matter of relaxing into that realization, into that awareness that we already have, rather than going out to the mall and finding it on the spiritual shopping mall.
Right. Yeah.
But I would say, still, I don't know that there's an end to the path, and you and I may be at different moments in our journey. That's a wonderful thing. It is an ongoing journey. There's awakening, and then integration, and then sometimes deepening, and things change. But for me, there continues to be, although there is a great sense of being able to rest in all that, in the fullness of the moment, there still feels like a deeper realization might be possible. Because I notice, for example, there are times when I collapse into a sense of fear or limit, usually provoked by childhood wounding and my issues, my stuff. My stuff gets triggered, my computer breaks down, and oh my God, I forget. It's as if the world is going to end, and I start to think that my computer hates me or whatever. It just drop right down into this kind of us versus them mentality. So for me, that's an opportunity for further deepening.
Yeah. I had this experience once that I think I could use it as an example of the difference between seeking and kind of being in God. I had this experience, it was a long, long time ago. And I was walking down a street, just on a walk, but there were things kind of around me that were a little discerning. So that part of me that usually is in the background came more up front, that discerning, and I have to be a little vigilant here in my surroundings. And because I don't normally live like that, that stood out to me. And then there was the shift, and I went from I'm walking down the street, I'm moving through life, walking down the street, and the shift was life is moving through me. Life is moving through me. So it was almost like I was standing still. Even though I was walking, it was almost like I was standing still. So to me, that kind of describes the difference between seeking and just being in God.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good analogy or not. It was an actual experience, and it was a profound experience, one that I remember.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that again, there are different stages in the seeking path. There is a time, I think, when many of us feel that certainly there's nothing good in me. And you might, if you read Paul in Romans, you might get the feeling that Paul had that feeling about himself. Like, there's nothing good in me. It's all in God. And God is not in me because there's nothing good in me. So that might be an early stage where we actually are psychologically unable to see that the gold is right here, right in this moment. So we discover it outside, and then we begin to realize, this this is in me too. And what a revelation. And I have maybe a higher self and maybe a not so refined lower self. So I begin to learn to trust and try to connect to that higher self and live my best life. And then further on the path, it gets blurry and it becomes unclear. Is there just a higher self, or is there just one self? And then the inside-outside distinction can just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no inside or outside. It's just one continuous reality.
Yeah.
And you could say that, I mean, we have a sense of I, which is very helpful with filing taxes and driving the car and making a living.
Mm-hmm.
But in another sense, we can relax into a state where that I sense is just very diffuse, if not disappearing, dissolving into emptiness.
Yeah. And that brings up something for me. I'll just speak of the Western world, since that's the one I live in. What mainstream the Western world, the Western society kind of defines as success and values, to me, is very different than what I define as success and the value system that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be difficult at times to find a balance of self-care while having the realization that the value system I have most likely won't lead to the kind of success that we recognize in our Western world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big deal. That's one reason it's important to have a sangha, a spiritual community,
Mm-hmm.
because we are venturing out on our own and saying what our values are.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not conventional values anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it could be a lonely life. Can be a little bit lonely without a sense of community, of realizing that. But this is, I feel that way sometimes, but I wouldn't want it any differently, really.
Yeah. Yeah. No, me either. And even though it might lessen or limit in some ways who I feel I can truly connect with, and there can be a sense of aloneness or somewhat of isolation with that, but the fullness that I experience from kind of being in that oneness, it's almost like if I was trying to get something from the outside to attach to. It's almost like this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's such limitation that what can fit in here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's an extreme limitation to that. But when there's a letting go, I have everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have I'm not in need because I have everything from that kind of surrendered, open, letting go place.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I work with individuals. I see individuals all the time
Mm-hmm.
that are in some kind of transition, and I really like the developmental model that psychologically, spiritually, we tend to go through a series of more or less predictable predictable developmental stages. And there's an early stage when it's very important to define who one is and own your gifts, and perhaps to enjoy tremendous success and some of the experience of wealth and power, seeing one's ability to create and manifest in the world. Those are all wonderful moments.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're lucky, the juice in that will start to dry up, and it will quit being so satisfying. So success for success's sake, in a traditional sense, may lose interest. Maybe it's precipitated by a medical emergency, a heart attack, a run-in with cancer. That happens all the time. Or maybe it's just aging, and we come to see that that's not exactly doing it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then a deeper level, a deeper level can emerge where we're more wanting to enjoy the quality of beingness and enjoying exploring life, exploring all the diverse manifestations of life that there are. Mm-hmm. And moving to a place of more receptivity. And that's just the beginning point, but I work with so many people, and there are so many people that are at that edge. I'm thinking of a woman in her 50s, early 50s, who's been tremendously successful as a dentist, but it just the joy that she used to find in her dentistry has just dried up. So is this something wrong with her? It may be. There might be some issues she could work on with the psychologist, but it might also be a calling she wants to do more work tied to her social activism and connecting to nature, connecting other people to nature. That's where she comes alive now. So we can receive a kind of invitation for a whole new start. And I think that's not necessarily the last stage that someone like her would go through either. It can just continue to deepen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if for some people, say, for example, somebody who was or is a successful dentist, if there's an awakening to maybe something beyond that, as you described earlier, the higher self, and I'm not saying she's not connected to her higher self, but I wonder if a shift, if a person can actually stay right where they're at, but they see it differently. Do you know what I mean?
That's possible too. Like she might stay a dentist.
Right, and see miracles in the teeth.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think, your life is so interesting because you were the COO, as I remember, from an awakened vantage point. And there are, I believe, a number of CEOs and business leaders that are really awake.
Yeah.
And that find ways to give the gift of awakening in the corporate space.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Which is very encouraging.
Yeah, because, it's just so true. I was in, most of my career was in corporate. I saw miracles everywhere. It wasn't like, I had my spiritual life and then my corporate life. The spiritual was never separate from anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's miracles everywhere. Everything is kind of like, it's not a either or, it's definitely a both and. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where I think it's just so important to be in touch with ourselves. Because on paper these days, there are so many wonderful ways to live a life
Mm-hmm.
that fulfills a societal need.
Yeah.
So many wonderful ways, but what is the way for you? What is the way for me, for a specific person? It's a matter of heart. It's a matter of really knowing oneself. And sometimes that changes. In my case, I was a Ph.D. biochemist,
Yeah.
and I just knew that that wasn't where I wanted to continue. It was hard to leave. I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But there's been no looking back. There's been no looking back. I hear what other people in the industry earn, and I think, oh my gosh, what would I do with all that money?
Mm-hmm.
So, there was definitely a trade-off there, but I made the right decision for me. And that's important. That's so important.
Yeah. 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 So could you go into some details about how it is that you call yourself also an awakening coach and awakening coach? So could you go into a little more detail about how you service others in their awakening?
Yeah. So, in my view, when a person is ready, when a person is getting ready to awaken, the thing that really helps them is to have someone reflect that state, their state back to them.
Yeah.
They start to have a little porosity, and the light is starting to come through. They're starting to notice it. They're starting to awaken to their own inner wisdom, inner knowing, to their own connection, living connection with spirit, beyond, not just at an intellectual level, but in a living and an embodied level.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do in my work as an awakening coach is to help mirror that back to them. Rather than, we're so accustomed to looking for an expert externally. And in the spiritual world, there are a lot of self-help books, 10 Steps to Awakening and 5 Essential Things to Do and all these things. But what's really necessary when we get close is to have somebody mirroring back. Well, I hear you asking me, how should I be approaching this situation? So rather than me playing expert, can I turn that back to the other and say, well, what's coming up for you around this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And encouraging them. Another thing that tends to happen is we need to start accepting every part of ourselves. As we get a little bit closer, generally we become aware of our shadow material, all the ways in which, I thought I was a spiritual person, but I just wanted to wring that person's neck in line at the grocery store. What's going wrong with me? Well, we all have so many more primal energies. The urge for sex, food, control, being 3 primary ones, to be loved. And if these are out of balance, out of hand, then we have those energies coming up, and it's important to encourage people to accept all that. Well, that's part of you too. And to let that be there, to let the energy come up rather than trying to repress it. And I'm saying come up and be felt and be integrated, perhaps never acted out. That's not necessary. I didn't wring that person's neck, but I might have had the thought. So to feel the energy, let it come up, quit repressing all these primal energies, and let them be part of your system to power your awakening.
So I'm curious, speaking of the shadow self, in connection to non-dual awareness. Can a person have a repressed shadow self and still experience non-dual awareness?
Yeah, they sure can. Just look at the spiritual newspaper headlines of guru scandals and
That's true.
this
Yeah.
and that. And you know, we have an aspect of the self is perhaps highly awakened, and yet perhaps the individual has pushed away, pushed down parts that didn't jive with that, with the persona they wanted to have as an awake person. And so they've pushed this down. They might not even realize they've pushed it down. It might not have been conscious at all. As happens, right, with people in midlife or even later life realizing that they're gay. And it wasn't consciously pushed down ever, but it got suppressed. And then when the conditions feel safe, it comes up and says, hey, I'm here, I'm some unfinished business, guess what? You get to deal with me now. So it can absolutely happen. And you know, shadow awareness is a gift of Carl Jung and before him Freud. And before Jung and Freud, there was no general understanding of shadow dynamics. And that means that none of the great traditions have any teachings about working with shadow. None of them. And so that is, you may have your genuine certified enlightenment certificate, but unless you've consciously employed some kind of shadow work, then there is bound to be shadow material in there.
So without the language of shadow or the understanding of shadow, maybe that's what they called sin.
Maybe. It might be. But, I mean, if we really go hunting, we could say, well, Jesus said, you know, you don't have to commit adultery. If you have lust in your heart, then you've already committed a sin. So thank you for another supremely difficult word to unpack.
Yeah.
But maybe, but I think for the most part, the traditions teach that awakening or enlightenment is the perfection of the person. And granted that practice needs to continue post-awakening, traditions are very clear on that as well, but that sitting in meditation will purify these things, and it does not. It does not. Shadow is identified and worked with in relationships. It shows up in relationships. It shows up as that. It shows up in a personal level in relationships, at a societal level. It shows up, and it requires. Without the knowledge of it, then people will not see it.
Well, that's kind of a key thing that you said, that the shadow meditation is kind of like a purification process. But did I understand you to say that through meditation, one does not necessarily get in touch with their shadow?
That's right. That's right. Now, it's hard for us to understand this because we're so savvy about shadow and psychology. So we're aware. So in our meditation, it might be that shadow could be touched or even worked with because we are aware of it. When it arises, we see it as an issue, and we might put some energy on it. Why is it that despite my upbringing, I still, if I'm honest with myself, have kind of a pullback reaction to a person of color? It's shocking to me. And yet I do have within myself, after the best possible upbringing by parents that were very involved in race relations and dialogue, I still have those thoughts. I picked them up from society.
Mm.
And so because of our awareness, we might be able to work with it, but it does not just get purified by meditation.
That's a really key point to make. It's, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's almost like there has to be a willingness and an awareness that there is something repressed, and a willingness and awareness to allow it to surface during meditation. But if there isn't the awareness which brings a willingness, a person could sit in meditation for hours a day and never psychologically expand.
Right, and see, like an example is, and Ken Wilber's written about this, that there were some Japanese Zen masters that grew up in a culture that had certain racial prejudices, and they adopted them.
Mm-hmm.
And even as highly enlightened Zen masters, they still had these racist beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, if the culture you're in has them too, how would you ever see them?
Mm-hmm.
How would they ever show up? It's not a shadow, it's just the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe there's some awareness that it's not a good thing to act out sexually, let's say, but it's pushed down so hard that it comes out unintentionally in all kinds of awkward ways. And then one day the situation's right, and all of a sudden there's a transgression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a transgression of let's say of one of the precepts for a monk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's helpful to see. It's helpful to have other people around to help us see our shadow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To see that person that drives us crazy beyond anything, that kind of activates us in a way that is out of proportion to what they're actually doing. That's often a key to shadow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see this, in my mind, we see this playing out on a global stage right now in politics and other forums, where there's a lot of projection going on both sides and a lot of unowned shadow in play that hyper energizes people's positions.
Yeah. So this is something I wonder about and don't fully understand, and this may not be accurate, that our thoughts, beliefs, actions, the biggest percentage, a huge percentage, probably, I don't know if this is accurate, over like 90% is subconscious. Is that accurate? Could you explain the subconscious and its connection to non-dual awareness, spiritual awakening?
So for me, the most relevant part of this is the things we experience growing up that are not okay. And this is tied to shadow work. But the things that come up and we're told you need to be a nice boy. So you push down that angry, not nice, greedy, selfish, let's say, some people do, and they take on the persona of the good child. I'm the golden child. I'm great at everything. I do what I'm told. But there is somewhere in there a rebellious person, a person that wants to, a person that wants to be free of those restraints. And if we push that down so much that we might push it down completely out of awareness, so that we aren't, well, I'm not an angry person. Me? No, I'm not an angry person. He got angry at me, and it was totally his thing. We see these qualities that we push down in other people. We see them in a way doing things that we only wish we could do, but we've even forgotten that we wish we could do them. We vilify that part of ourselves, and now we only see it in other people. So that's one way that the subconscious shows up. These pieces that have been pushed down out of our awareness. And all that, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to keep all this stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a good person. I mean, imagine like trying to be a saintly, pious person when inside you're seething with rage from stuff that happened earlier in your life, seething with rage, dying to get your way, wanting to control, but oh no, when we vilify these parts of ourselves, we have to keep them down. So it takes a tremendous amount of energy, and that energy isn't available for awakening then. Mm-hmm. It's tied up in maintaining this semblance of who we are. So sooner or later, that energy has to be allowed to flow back up to energize the system. And we need to come to terms with those parts of ourselves. There is a racist part of myself. There's an energy there that I'm not proud of it, but hey, it's part of me. So can I integrate that into my energy? Not acting it out, but not keeping it repressed anymore either.
So one's essence, depending on the work they're doing and what they're becoming aware of, wouldn't one's essence kind of be changing throughout their evolving? I'm curious because to me, and this is just a personal, it's not an overall blanket statement, but my soul has an essence on its own. It came here with an essence, and that's a continuous thing throughout my life. But the integration of through, as you said, through relationship, kind of growing and learning through relationship, the integration of that soul essence and the personality maybe has changed. I don't know if I expressed that in a clear way. My question is around essence, and is that an ever-changing thing through the integration process of awakening?
Yeah. Well, I think our awareness of, I don't actually use the word essence.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the divine streams into existence, and then as it streams into existence, it gradually shows up as form. Thought forms, emotional forms, and then physical form, what we call gross physical forms. It streams into being and becomes all of that, including the soul. And so that pure divinity gets refracted according to our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
According to our stuff, which is some from past life, some from this life.
Mm-hmm.
From our DNA, from everything we inherit. It gets refracted. And so, yes, a way that we see the divine within or is constantly changing if we're growing because we're working on our stuff. And once a person has the idea, oh, there's shadow material, then we may be lucky to start realizing, oh, I think there might be some shadow in this situation.
So it's almost like the more work one does, the more awareness one has, the more purification one does, the filter of their form becomes clearer for divinity to shine through it.
Yeah, I like the idea that the plan, the divine created the universe and duality so that it could know itself through duality. So it's like a game. The perfect wholeness wanted to know itself, and so it created the universe for that purpose, and all of us. And our journey now is to first experience separation consciousness, experience the pain of that, experience what it's like to be an individual being, and then over lifetimes to start to find our way back to our essential oneness with the divine. And so depending on where we are in that trajectory, most people watching this are somewhere toward reuniting from an initial glimpse to some higher level realization. Once we kind of get the hang of it, that there it is, I kind of see it. For a moment I thought I saw it, but even then it shows up differently at different phases of the journey. And we think, well, we might think that our beloved, when we fall in love, that's going to deliver everything to us. And it's part of it. But it's not everything. And then we might think that some initial awakening at the Zendo was the big thing. And that's part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And so our understanding of the nature of ultimate reality of the divine grows and evolves as we do. Just like I was saying earlier with this, appropriate for a child view of God is like a man in the sky. That is like granting blessings and physically listening and coming to help and sending angels. And this is getting really complicated.
Well, it certainly can, through inquiry, but at the same time, I find for myself there's nothing more simple. More simple. So and this is kind of just a personal question and something I've pondered about based on having an awakening very young and continued, awakenings throughout my life. Here's my question, and not that you have definite answers to all the questions. Is a soul individual? Almost like, because to me, based on that young experience, the soul just was, and the experience, the first one that I had at a young age, informed me that if I wasn't going to stay connected to soul, then I would develop a persona identity based on what the people around me and life itself told me about who and what I was. And then the persona would have been individual, based on the conditioning. So the main question there is, because sometimes when people talk about soul, it's almost like there's an attachment to it or an identity to it. And I'm not sure for me that there is, but I'm just curious. It's someone else's way of seeing that.
Yeah. Well, I haven't had the particular experience you had with, so my vantage point's a little bit different. And I've been, as you know, I've been studying vortex healing, and one of the parts of that path, I'm studying both the healing arts as taught by vortex healing, where there's a path where you learn tools for healing, and there's also an awakening stream or an awakening path. And in the awakening path, I've been through some movements recently that one of them was a dismantling of the sense of the soul, of what you might call the soul. Because it's like, as I said, the divine shines in, and gradually takes on form. First becoming consciousness and then becoming form. And at some point in there can be according to that tradition, a sense of self, an I sense appears. And then everything is interpreted somewhat through that, and then the I sense develops and then becomes highly articulated. And then on the return journey, we notice there's still an I sense there. I might lose it for a time, but it comes back. And there are times that I get upset or I want something. There are ways that I identify. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think we can live without
knowing.
I think soul is one construct. Obviously, has a lot of meaning for you because of these moments you had early in your life.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the same meaning for me.
But I think it's an important, because just like God and love have all these attachments to the word, so does soul.
It does.
And I think people can just, automatically or kind of almost nonchalantly talk about soul, their soul, their soul. And I don't know. I don't think it's just based on my young experience. I hear people using that word and giving it a lot of attention and weight.
They do. I agree. And I think, as with the word God, there might be like 5 or 10 different typical meanings of the word soul. And as we develop, as we grow up, as we develop psychologically in a more and more nuanced way, then our understanding of the soul might become more and more nuanced. Where early on it might basically be a collection of core beliefs, like what one takes to be most important in life. I don't know. I haven't really explored it. It's not a word I use a whole lot.
Yeah.
Partly because it is vague.
Yes. Yes, but yet, especially in spiritual circles, that is used a lot. The word soul is used a lot.
Not in Buddhist circles, because in Buddhism there's no self. There's no abiding self. There's something that the universe is constantly shifting, and what we take to be ourselves can be deconstructed.
Yep.
The Zen ideal is that the awakened person is like a mirror that reflects whatever is present to whatever they're present to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we show up differently moment to moment depending on the environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I heard something once, and I don't know where I heard it. Spirituality is asking the questions. Enlightenment is no more questions.
Mm.
I don't know if that's a true, accurate description or not, but because I do, definitely, unless I'm engaging in creating a video, an interview, my mind isn't in that place of questioning.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the moment that I'm in and the experience of that. And with that comes a real stillness, even in the mind, a stillness of the mind.
Yeah, well, there's that, right? There's more of a ability to just rest in our connection to all that is. But I find it quite stimulating to live in a big city with people and married and interacting with all kinds of people and on committees, and I mean there are real, and being politically active.
Mm-hmm.
There are serious questions to ask, to wrestle with. Our society is wrestling with some serious issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be of service as is possible. I mean, I don't have any secret answers. I don't think there is a secret answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that often, circumstances provoke me and require me to go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
The other day, or maybe a month ago now, all of a sudden some of the Venezuelans that had been shipped to Chicago from Texas started showing up at the Whole Foods market where I do my shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And they were at both entrances. There were up to 4 different locations that they would stake out to looking for money to help support themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this really troubling, and there were so many things going on. There were individuals that used to have kind of a territory where they would sit and sell streetwise or sit and ask for donations that were displaced by the new people.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole ecosystem was upset by this new group of people coming in. And then, I mean, I was so moved and troubled to see the faces behind the news.
Mm-hmm.
And to ask myself, what could I really do?
Mm-hmm.
What could I really do? I want to do something.
Yeah.
What can I really do?
Right.
And so I think this is an essential move, to have access to that place of great rest and fullness, but to also be willing to come out and interact with the world in ways that are painful,
Mm-hmm.
are challenging. That's really the bodhisattva ideal, to switch traditions here. The bodhisattva, having realized some degree of freedom, some degree of awakening, willingly re-inhabits the workaday world, intending to be to help. And they willingly, even though they've tasted the freedom of nirvana, of complete release, they willingly come back in to engage, saying that they'll remain until everyone else has been freed first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess in my engagement, it's really important for me, and this is a question I ask myself every morning. What do I have control over?
Mm-hmm.
Focus on that, move towards that. and what don't I have control over, release that. Because, and even in engaging, what do I have control over? My own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Yeah.
And pretty much that's what it always comes down to. And for me, instead of allowing myself to get like pulled in or onto another path, to hold that place of intention, I have control over my own thoughts, feelings, and actions, which creates a conscious choice and intention to bring into whatever I'm engaging with. Because if I don't do that, I think I could easily get pulled into or try to change something I can't have no control over. Yeah.
You know, what I hear in your, I mean, I really relate to what you're saying, especially that some reflection is required so that we need to find skillful means to work with each situation. And to me, the border situation, I mean, everything that happens is only always reminding us that we're all one. We're all one organism. And that stuff's going on and we need to wake up and deal with it. And so the people streaming across the border, willing to risk great sacrifice, even possibly losing their lives to get here. I mean, this is a signal of something profoundly off in our world. So what can we do? I mean, there's the particular family that I see that I might give them some money or buy them some food, but as a society, we need to, these are all alarms that say we need to come together to address these issues. This is my brother, this is my sister here. And on every scale, you know, as somebody said the other day, well, do I want to go into politics? But, you know, everything that's showing up is helping us to understand the what's going on in the world. And it can be a call to wake up and deal with things, rather than just hiding out in our little entertainment bubble. But you know, and just like a person we need to have boundaries as individuals. We can't simply go out and act like we don't need food and rest and medical care. We could do that for a little while, but we need to have healthy boundaries, even as we realize that we're also one with everything. And we can't just, let's say, maybe we have to figure out, do we want to just invite the whole world to come to the U.S.? Or what would the healthy boundaries look like for a country in this day and age?
Yeah.
What would healthy boundaries look like that are healthy for us, healthy for them?
And in the long run, beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, benefiting all people.
Yeah.
I think we're in a time of there's been the first dawning of the realization that we are one people, one globe, united in our humanity. There's been that realization, and now we're in kind of as so often happens, you have a realization, and then on the way home from the retreat, you stop and buy a bag of snacks of some kind and gulp them down. We're having a kind of reaction to that initial awakening to the global nature of humanity. And it has to play itself out. But there's only one possible future, and that is for all the people of the earth to come together and to learn to work together as a whole.
Well, I don't know that we have the choice of being in some kind of denial or some kind of, we're in the United States and we're protected. I don't know that we have that choice anymore. And I don't think there's a going back. It's almost like Pandora's box has been opened and the shadow has been revealed, or the shadows have been revealed. And I don't think that box can be closed. It's open.
Right.
Again, there's no going back.
It's like repressed materials. They have opened up, and we now have to work with those energies and integrate them.
Yeah, which in the bigger picture of things, that's the best thing that could have happened.
Exactly.
Because that's the only place healing can really happen.
Exactly. And humans are somewhat motivated by beauty, and they want to move toward beauty and light, but what really reliably motivates human beings is pain. And so we are experiencing a lot of pain.
Yep.
And I think that's the great motivator, because otherwise we are going to, some part of us also wants to deny and just live in the comforts of this age.
So I know we have a limitation on our talk, and I did want to understand more about the energy healing, vortex healing, non-dual awareness, and what you most would like to share with the viewers of this video.
Yeah. Well, it's now been just over 13 years since I had the awakening to non-dual awareness in 2011. That marked this significant change and new stage in my journey. And it's been nonstop change and integration and occasional deepenings ever since then. But all through this period, there has, whenever I was able to stop and rest, I have access to that place. I have access to that non-dual awareness, or non-separateness, and a sense of connection to all others. How that shows up exactly has changed over time, but it remains there and is only deepened. But I also became aware shortly after awakening that I had trauma from my childhood. I had trauma from my childhood. I was actually dealing with PTSD. And there had been rumblings of this for, let's say, decades. I just kept pushing it down. I can't afford you. I can't afford to have PTSD. I can't afford it. So I push it down and just carry on with my work. Double down on my effort, right? And which is unfortunately the situation for so many people.
Yeah.
But here I was, I woke, and spaciousness in which anything could come up and not be too overwhelming, not be too terrible. So in that space, I became aware of, childhood trauma. Look at that. And I've been talking with my parents. We've been talking about some of the things that happened. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I wet the bed as a child, and they didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. So, but it had the side effect of, for one thing, creating some anxiety for me around bedtime that I lived with until fairly recently, to be honest.
Wow.
So things came up, and that I could rest in everything, but then stuff comes up too. And there was a lot of stuff. There was stuff not from my childhood, but from a position I'd left under not the best circumstances. It left me feeling kind of wounded about my ability in a certain way. to make things happen in the world. There were all kinds of things that came up. I realized that there was a part of me that had never really been seen. And so the affirmation needs continued. And I had hoped that there were like all these hopes that, unreasonable hopes that I had for what awakened life would be like. That people would really love me in a way that they hadn't before. I thought that would come with this. And, those were all disappointed sooner or later. So, awake and with a lot of issues. And it's like the light wants to flow through me seamlessly, but there are a lot of boulders in the stream bed. A lot of the stuff is the boulders. And vortex healing has been such a gift because it's a tool for working with those boulders. The ones that I'm consciously aware of, the ones that I'm starting to be consciously aware of, even the ones that I'm not exactly aware of. And so this is something I'm offering to the people I work with now. If there are particular issues that just seem to be coming up over and over, there are energetic tools for working with them. And it's made a tremendous difference for me. And yeah, it's a fascinating system. I've been studying vortex for 3 years now. I've been in class for something under 40 days. And I have, this many tools in the collection of handouts. So it's really exciting to be able to, because without a tool like this, I had my awakeness and my awareness, and when stuff comes up, the way of awakened living is to let it come up, let it flow through you, fully feel it, remaining identified with your oneness as best you can, and this slowly heals all that stuff. But it's a slow process, and this is a way to really accelerate it.
So the term vortex healing, why vortex?
Well, there's a lot. Vortex is the current holder of the vortex lineage, Rick Weinman. His initial experience was of a vortex of energy, and that's part of why it got that name, as far as I know. Okay. Doesn't have anything to do with, say, the idea of vortices located around the U.S. or other countries.
So how you apply it in helping others is, would you say that what needs to be healed or wants to be healed will keep showing up as a pattern in one's life?
Well, it does. It does. I'll give an example. There was somebody I worked with that, even though they were awake, quite awake, they had from childhood or who knows where, there was still a sense of self-hatred pushed down for the most part. It was such an unpleasant thing to feel that they still were wanting to hold it down, but it showed up in their wondering if people really liked them. Even when in business situations, they would wonder if their colleagues really liked them. Even with friendships, they wondered, does this person really like me? And so going in and releasing some of the self-hatred led to a spontaneous shift in that experience, where they were able to have much more of a sense of course they like me, everyone likes me, I'm a good guy. They'd been projecting this hatred onto other people subconsciously. And it just shifted like that, like, of course they like me. or it might be a habit, just any number of. It might be a medical complaint. I myself, as you know, had been dealing with chronic fatigue for a couple years, and it was really another vortex healer who was able to clear the Epstein-Barr virus from my body, and that was the thing that really brought me back to health. And vortex is an incredible tool for working with viral and bacterial infections, and even with cancer at higher levels. I haven't done the cancer training yet.
So there is training for that?
There is training for that. Like I said, I'm 3 years in, and there are at least 3 more years until I could have possibly taken most of the classes. So it's quite sophisticated.
Yeah. So you are able to take those 3 years that you have under your belt thus far and apply them with the other services that you help people.
That's right. So a person might be like I said, we might be working with this self-hatred issue. And they could certainly work on that one-on-one, and we could talk about it, and they could explore the basis for it, and see that there's really no basis, or that it comes from something way in the past that has no bearing on how they are now. But this stuff is held in the body, and it can be very difficult to release, even with somatic experience, somatic tools. It can be very difficult to release. And sometimes vortex session. So I might offer to integrate some vortex into a 1-hour session, and that might be a really quick way to get some freedom around that.
Have you had the experience in working with others that went through vortex healing and the other services that you offer that once there's a healing in one area, that it opens up for other things that need healing to arise?
Well, I think that, to me, that's just inevitable. That's just what happens. When we can only tolerate so much at once. So we try to keep things down subconsciously until we have the bandwidth for them. So but it's just one thing after another. The healer I worked with around the chronic fatigue, I bought a pack of 10 sessions, right? Surely this would take care of everything.
Yeah.
And halfway through it, I said, this isn't going to quite do it, is it? It's not like I have a dozen issues. It's like I have 1,000 issues. and we just smiled and laughed. That we're a product of this society, a broken society. We just pick stuff up all the time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to all be removed. I love my life.
Yeah.
But while I'm alive, I also love growing and deepening. And this is another way to go about that.
Yeah. So what would you have to say about the differences of doing healing work kind of alone, oneself through meditation, different spiritual practices, whatever a person may be applying in their life, and doing that alone versus finding a trusted someone to do the healing work with?
Yeah, it brings in a relational component. There are a lot of, I have an hour or so of healing time for myself each morning when I use vortex tools. And it's a wonderful part of my day, highlight of my day, many days. But to work with an individual, now there's vulnerability and there's intimacy. and it might touch on something where there's a lot of shame, or something that, shame is good. And so I get to experience some forgiveness or non-judgment, which is just so beautiful. And sometimes the healer will sense something that I'm not really seeing, and might say, have you ever considered? And that might open something up that would have been very difficult for me to come to on my own.
Yeah.
So the relational piece of it.
Yeah.
And just getting out of your own, I mean, most of our issues are so in our face that we don't even realize they have issues. We say, that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
I've always been that way.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you have always been that way as long as you know, but you haven't actually always been that way. You're actually this radiant, shiny person that's free from all constraints. But we experience ourselves as both free and constrained. So another person can help us see that stuff and maybe say, you don't have to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we close, Bill, would you be willing to expand a little bit and talk a little bit about your most recent blog that I think you're 2 or 3 into it?
Yeah. Right. Well, I started A Monk in the World my Substack because I wanted to share, and I'd felt there was a couple years ago I wrote 90 weekly posts, and I just got exhausted by it, and so I wasn't sure I could continue, but things have changed, and I've gone through some experience, through some deepenings, and it felt like time to share again, because I want to share my life. I want to share what I've learned. I just want to share with other people. I love writing. It helps me get clear for myself, and but my intention is that I'll give some hope to other people, and possibly something of value to other people that are also on a spiritual journey. In my journey, I've had so many experiences in Christian context, in a Buddhist context, in New Age context, vortex healing contexts, and so it's my joy and challenge to try to bring all that together for myself, and then I hope now to share some of it.
Yeah. Thank you. And I am, subscribed to your blog, and look forward to going on that journey with you. Can you talk just a little bit about, because something, as you were saying that, this realization of the importance of sharing. Because what good are, these awakenings and experiences and evolving if we kind of hold on to it and keep it to ourselves? If we don't share it, I would think without sharing, we could possibly lose all that we've gained.
Well, that's very dear to my heart, really. There's been a lot written about spiritual materialism, this idea of like accumulating beautiful, juicy, pleasurable experiences, almost as ego adornments.
Yeah.
Then I had my realization.
Yeah. And this makes me special.
And this makes me special. That's right. And then I did that. Well, just the word "I" is a giveaway there, although it's hard to speak without saying "I." I love writing. I love sharing. I love telling stories, and I love building community. So my real intention here is to build a community and to be in dialogue with interesting people, and so we can grow together. And when you tell a story, then it's out there, and people will see it in a way that I might not have seen it, and that can be helpful too. But well, it really feels like, I'm not a great social activist. I'm not a great scholar, but I do love telling stories, and I do love sharing what I've learned along the way. And so I think I used the story of the monk that wrote little poems on leaves.
Yes, I loved that.
And just released them into the stream. And my intention is, that this will bring light into the world. Somehow light, the divine, could come through me into these words and touch people in some way.
Yeah.
But I never know if that's going to really happen or how it might happen. So I'm just writing and releasing it into the water.
Yeah.
Way back when, I was very interested in the Buddhist-Christian dialogue, the idea that these Buddhist monks and Christian monks who are deeply immersed in their traditions, both in the view, in the metaphysics of their tradition, and in the practices, they were getting together and sharing what it was like to be Buddhist or Christian, and looking for similarities that might be there between a theistic religion that has a god and a non-theistic religion that has no concept of a god.
Yeah.
And I found that so fascinating, and that's one of the strands of my life, has been being between traditions and integrating traditions. And I hope to share some of that story with people. And I'm a Ph.D. biochemist, so we'll see what wants to be told, but that was not an easy journey to integrate a kind of rational, scientific, empirical, data-driven mindset with this more inwardly focused, subjective world that I discovered.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what comes out, and I hope other people will be too.
Yeah, I'm sure they will be. Yeah. And that's interesting what you said about the Christian and Buddhist. Because as you said that, it's like, what came to mind is the non-personal and the personal.
Non-personal and personal.
And we need both. There's an importance to both.
I mean, what I loved about Zen Buddhism was that it didn't use the word God or sin. And so the teachings, when I heard them, they just penetrated right into me. Where when I might go to hear a very good speaker speak about Christianity, anytime they mentioned either of those words, I kind of dissociated for a little while. So, it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, besides the personal and non-personal, I also see mind and heart.
Mind and heart and body.
And body.
Because Buddhism, it was very physical too. The practice included doing prostrations every day, 108 prostrations. Very physical practice, a lot of work practice. So not like armchair Buddhism at all. And getting yelled at by my Zen master, that was also a central part of my experience. So there were a lot of different things going on.
Yeah. And so now at this point in your life, you have all these different awarenesses and understandings, and I'm guessing the integration of all of them to bring you to where you're at this point in your life experience and then applying all of that wisdom through the services that you work with others in.
Yeah, that's what I aim to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I aim to do. Mm-hmm. And
well, thank you, Bill. This has been just in this experience alone throughout this conversation. There's been a real connection and a real being seen and heard, going back and forth, mm-hmm. and what you do and who you are and your commitment to being a monk in the world is extremely important, and I'm very grateful that you continue to be on that journey.
Mm. Thank you, Irma. I so value our friendship, and it's such a pleasure to be in the conversation with you today.
Thank you, Bill.